Hello again, and welcome back. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you might happen to be catching up with us today. We are back with session 2 of our Return to Allendar campaign. We did have a little bit of an issue with the live play recording that we were doing yet again. We are still working out the technical difficulties on that, so I apologize. We've got the first half of it, so I will be posting that separately. But I did say that I'd keep up with the narrative recaps. So we've got that here for you now. Sit back, enjoy. There is some visual in there, but it's primarily just background stuff. So it's mainly here for the audio, for the storytelling, and so that you guys can see what we've been up to so far. Sit back, enjoy. I hopefully will see you again really soon. We've got another session coming up. And yeah, comment below, let me know what you think, and any ideas you have for what you'd like to see going forward. Speak to you soon.
The Broken Keg is unusually quiet this morning, its lanterns flickering softly, casting pools of golden light across scarred wooden tables. The air smells of frying eggs and sizzling sausages, mingling with the faint tang of stale ale that clings stubbornly to the room. Behind the bar, Darvoth Bitterbrew, a hulking orc with gleaming tusks and a permanent grin, leans lazily against the counter, absently polishing a dented tankard with a rag that's done more harm than good over the years. The creak of the front door breaks the stillness as Theodore steps inside, shaking off the morning chill. At the same time, heavy footsteps echo from the stairs as Saladin makes his way down from his room. Darvoth glances up, his grin widening as he sets the tankard aside with a thunk. "Well, if it isn't my favorite rabble," he booms, spreading his thick arms wide. "Come on, take a load off. Got breakfast on the griddle and ale that won't knock you over." Barely. He busies himself at the grill, piling eggs, sausages, and thick slices of crusty bread onto plates. Moments later, steaming dishes and mugs of watered-down ale are slid across the bar. "Eat up," Darvoth says with a wink, leaning forward on his elbows. "First meals on the house, unless you've got coin, in which case, I'll happily add to my retirement fund." Theodore and Saladin dig in without hesitation, the clatter of cutlery breaking the quiet hum of the room. The door creaks again and a gust of cool mist rolls inside as a young woman steps through, her robes damp and clinging to her from the morning fog. She wears the plain attire of an assistant under-cleric of Celiar, the sunburst pendant at her neck catching faint light. Her brown hair is pulled into a loose braid, strands falling free around a face lined with exhaustion. Deep shadows under her eyes betray a sleepless night, and her shoulders slump as if under an invisible weight. Darvoth straightens up at the sight of her, his booming voice softening. "Morning, undercleric," he greets, his tone almost gentle. "Or is it still night for you lot? You look like you've been through it." The woman trudges to the bar and drops heavily onto a stool. "Thick coffee, Darvoth," she mutters, pressing her forehead into her palm. "Strong enough to bring me back from the halls of eternity." Darvoth chuckles low, grabbing an old copper pot and starting to brew. "Rough night at the temple?" She lifts her head just enough to glare at him, though it lacks any real bite. "Another murder," she says flatly, her voice tight. "Near the eastern quarter this time. Same as the others, blood drained, body twisted, symbols carved into the walls. I've been assisting Lady Seraphina all night, documenting everything." Darvoth's jovial expression falters. His tusks twitch as his brow furrows. "Another one, huh? That makes what, 3? 4? 5? The undercleric corrects, wrapping her hands around the steaming mug Darvoth sets before her. "And this one, it happened right around the same time as the chaos at the arena. The city's falling apart, Darvoth, that everyone's on edge." Darvoth leans forward, his face darkening. "You're saying these two things might be connected?" She shrugs, the motion heavy with weariness. "Lady Seraphina thinks it's too much of a coincidence to ignore. There are no witnesses, no leads, just the same symbols mocking us. It's like the killer knows we're watching and doesn't care." At the bar, Saladin and Theodore exchange a glance, both pausing mid-bite. Slowly, Theodore stands and approaches the undercleric, his boots thudding softly against the wooden floor. She jumps a little as he clears his throat, looking startled to see him so close. Apologies, Theodore says, holding his hands up in a calming gesture. We couldn't help but overhear. It sounds like you're short-handed. Maybe we can help. He gestures back towards Saladin, who nods in silent agreement. The woman blinks at him, her exhaustion shifting into wariness. That's not up to me, she replies cautiously. You need to speak to Lady Seraphina if you're serious. Theodore nods, undeterred. Fair enough, but perhaps you can share anything else that might help us understand the situation. Details, patterns, anything. The undercleric hesitates, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. She studies Theodore for a long moment, measuring him. Finally, she sighs, shoulders sagging further, as though her burdens grow heavier the longer she speaks. The crime scenes, she says quietly, aren't just murders, they're rituals. The bodies are drained of blood, and the symbols carved into the walls, they're not random. Lady Seraphina suspects dark magic, but it's like nothing we've seen before. She sets the mug down and grabs a napkin, borrowing a bit of charcoal from Darvoth. Carefully, she sketches one of the runes, a jagged, spiraling mark that seems to twist unnaturally, even on paper. She slides the napkin across the bar. This is one of them, she murmurs. There are others, but this one always appears. Saladin studies the rune, brow furrowed in confusion. I don't recognize it, he admits. Theodore stares at it, his expression troubled. The mark feels strange, familiar in a way that makes his skin crawl. Though he doesn't know what it means, an unsettling thought stirs in the back of his mind. Somehow, he knows how to pronounce it. The moment lingers, tense and silent, until the undercleric sighs and rises from her seat. She pulls her damp cloak tighter around her shoulders, the weariness in her posture unmistakable. Lady Seraphina is still at the crime scene, but she'll be heading to the halls of justice soon to rest. If you're serious about helping, that's where you'll find her. Without another word, she turns and heads for the door. The tavern falls quiet again, save for the crackling of the hearth and the faint clink of utensils on plates. Darvoth watches her go, then lets out a low breath, shaking his head somberly. Well, he says, forcing a lighter tone, that's enough doom and gloom for one morning. Eat up. Sounds like the city's got plenty of trouble waiting for you. Theodore's gaze drifts back to the napkin, the twisted rune etched into its surface. His gut churns uneasily as that creeping thought persists, whispering a sound he shouldn't know. A name, maybe dot or a word, whatever it is, it sits on the edge of his mind, waiting. Talek awakens with a groan in the dim jail cell, the rough stone walls cool against his metal frame. The clang of a key in the lock startles him upright, and a bored-looking guard swings the iron-barred door open and gestures toward the exit. Your fine's 1 gold, Warforged, pay up and get out, the guard grunts, holding out his hand. Talek digs into his pouch, handing over the single coin with a low hum of annoyance. The guard waves him through, and Talek steps out onto the cobblestone street, blinking against the pale morning light. The city is already alive. Street vendors hawk their wares. The chatter of merchants mixes with the clatter of carts. And the smell of fresh bread and roasting meat drifts on the crisp air as he heads toward the Broken Keg. But as he passes through the morning market, something catches his eye. Penny's familiar cart, a jumble of curious odds and ends, stands the edge of the square, its canopy flapping lightly in the breeze. Talek's memory flashes to other times he's wandered past her stall, always finding something unusual, a strange trinket, a mechanical part, or an oddity that defies explanation. Intrigued, he alters his course. Penny, already hard at work arranging her goods, flashes him a bright smile as he approaches. Well, if it isn't Talek, good morning to you, my industrious friend. Morning, Penny, Talek rumbles, his glowing eyes scanning the cluttered cart. Almost immediately, his gaze fixes on a case prominently displayed at the center of the stand. Within, an amulet sits nestled on a bed of fraying velvet, but it's no ordinary piece of jewelry. The metal looks wrong, solid, functional, and utilitarian rather than precious. It's an industrial alloy, the kind often used in the construction of war-forged like himself. Suspended from the sturdy chain is a small mirror, its surface framed by delicate and intricate etchings that seem to shift if stared at for too long. A crude sign taped to the case reads, "Fancy amulet that can't be identified, could be cursed. 50 GP. Talek raises a brow plate. "Can't be identified?" he asks, his tone dubious. Penny shrugs with exaggerated innocence, hands on her hips. "What can I say? I've had 3 clerics, a wizard, and some very grumpy adventurers try to get a read on it. Nada, found it down south near Copper." She leans closer, grinning conspiratorially. 50 gold and it's yours, had it priced higher, but so far no interest. The AT least it is getting attention to the cart though. Talek snorts, though his gaze lingers on the amulet longer than he intends. The alloy, the craftsmanship, it speaks to him in some unspoken way, though he can't quite place why. He reaches for his pouch, already knowing what he'll find. Not nearly enough coin. 50 steep, he says, shaking his head. I don't have the gold. Penny waves a hand dismissively. Oh, I had a feeling you wouldn't. She gestures to a small pile of battered goods beside the cart, gears, tools, small broken devices. But you can fix things, and lucky for you, I've got plenty that needs fixing. Take a few of these off my hands, mend them up, and we'll call it a fair deal. You know where to find me. Talek considers for a moment before nodding. Agreed. He carefully gathers up the assortment of broken items into his satchel. Scrap metal here, a cracked hinge there. And something that looks suspiciously like a gnomish toasting device. Good man, Penny says cheerfully. Oh, and if you don't catch me here this week, I'll be at the stacks or check in with the big junk dealers on Southside. Market gets dull after a while, you know how it is. I'll find you, Talek replies. He gives the amulet one last glance as Penny locks the case, tucking it safely behind a cart. That quiet pull gnaws at him again, a whisper at the back of his mind that he shakes it off and turns back toward the keg, his footsteps heavy on the cobblestones. Talek pushes open the door to the broken keg, the familiar smell of fried eggs, warm bread, and stale ale greeting him. The tavern's usual hum of activity is muted this morning, save for the scrape of cutlery on plates and the low rumble of conversation. Across the room, he spots Saladin and Theodore seated at a table, both halfway through their breakfast. He strides over, his steps heavy against the floorboards, and with a grunt, drops the box of broken items onto the table with an echoing thud. The utensils rattle, and a few stray sausages nearly roll off Saladin's plate. Saladin bursts into laughter, leaning back in his chair with a grin. And there he is. How was your night? Talek's expression is unreadable, but his metallic voice carries a dry edge. Accommodations were free, but I can't say the hospitality was warm. From behind the bar, Darvoth catches sight of the Warforged and lets out a booming chuckle. Morning, Talek. Hope you enjoyed your luxurious stay at the Constable's Inn. He resumes, wiping down a mug, still using the same questionable rag, before giving the group a tusked grin. Darvoth, Talek rumbles as he begins to unpack the broken items. You wouldn't happen to have collected the winnings on Saladin's fight, would you? Darvoth smirks and reaches under the bar, pulling out a small leather bag that clinks with coin. You know I did. With a casual toss, he sends it sailing across the room. Talek snatches it out of the air with practiced ease, the bag thudding into his open palm. Much appreciated, Talek replies, tucking it away before settling into a chair. Theodore finishes chewing his last bite of bread, then leans forward with an eager glint in his eye. You got good timing, Talek. Let me catch you up. As they recount their morning, Darvotha's conversation with the undercleric, the strange symbols, and the unsettling connection to the chaos in the arena, Saladin leans in with a grin and slides a crumpled napkin across the table. So, he says casually, want to go be nosy about a weird murder with us? Talek narrows his glowing eyes and picks up the napkin, studying the hastily drawn rune. For a long moment, he says nothing, turning the symbol over in his mind slowly. His voice emerges, heavy and, I know this, he murmurs. It's a variation of a rune used by cults devoted to Zaros, or possibly Mordril. two gods of the dark pantheon. It's old, roughly translates to something like a failed path, or an ended road, a venture cut short. But his brow plates furrow slightly, and he tilts the napkin to examine the symbol from another angle. There's something different here. It still conveys a dead road, but there's more an imperceptible push towards something beyond the failure. Like a path refusing to end, pressing on even when it shouldn't. Theodore exchanges a glance with Saladin. That's ominous. Everything about this is ominous, Saladin quips, though his tone is more serious than before. Talek sets the napkin down, his metal fingers lingering over its edge. The strange pull from earlier, at Penny's cart, echoes faintly in his mind, though he doesn't mention it. Without another word, he reaches into the box of broken items and pulls out a cracked music box, his deft hands already beginning to disassemble it. We'll need answers soon, Theodore mutters, watching the war-forged work. Saladin stretches with a groan, pushing his plate aside. We've had a long night, and it sounds like the city's not done throwing trouble our way. Let's take today to recover, see if our mysterious fireman shows his face again tonight, and then pay the clerics a visit tomorrow. A sound plan. Talek agrees without looking up, small gears and screws clicking softly under his hands. The conversation lapses into comfortable quiet, punctuated by the clink of utensils on plates and the occasional soft hum from Talek as he tinkers. Outside, the city churns on, oblivious to the pieces moving beneath its surface. But here, in the warm haze of the broken keg, the group begins to gather their strength, the air heavy with the quiet promise of what's to come. The evening at the broken keg hums with life as the group lounges in their usual booth, drinking and sharing stories. Laughter cuts through the low din of the crowd, and for a while, the world feels simple again. Darboff passes by, clapping Talek on the shoulder with a grin. Tinkering's fine during the day, big guy, but once the bar gets packed, I need that table space. Box is safe under the bar for now. Talek gives a slight nod of acknowledgement, his attention lingering on his now empty tabletop. He's just about to comment when the door to the keg creaks open. The breeze from outside gusts through, carrying with it a hint of the evening chill, and a figure steps into the warm glow of the tavern. The man is cloaked, his hood drawn low over his face, and the leather of his armor creaks softly as he moves. For a moment, he's just another stranger in a busy bar, until the light catches a flicker of fiery orange hair glowing beneath the hood. Theodore notices first, freezing mid-sip and nudging Saladin. There, look. The others glance up just as the man turns slightly, confirming the glimpse of vibrant hair. Saladin's easygoing demeanor sharpens into something more attentive as the group exchanges quick looks. Without hesitation, they straighten up as the man walks directly toward their booth. The air feels heavier when he stops in front of them. Evening, Saladin drawls, pushing his empty tankard aside as he eyes the newcomer. All right, who are you then? What's going on? The man hesitates for only a beat before pulling back his hood. His face is angular, marked by subtle scars and years of experience. Name's Zathian, he says, his voice low, but steady. I think we have some things to talk about. With a nod, the group rises, subtly surrounding him as they lead him toward a quieter corner of the tavern. Saladin takes point, sliding into a seat opposite Zathian as the rest settle in around the table. So, Saladin prompts, his tone calm but pointed. You were at the arena. Care to explain what that was all about? Zathian leans back slightly, arms folding across his chest. I was hired to be there, he says vaguely. I'm not going to tell you who paid me. Let's just say they knew what was coming. What do you mean, knew? Theodore presses, brow furrowed. Zathian shrugs, his expression unreadable. The raid, they knew the guards were going to hit the arena. That MY job was to make sure the fight ended before that happened, and to try to get as many people out as I could before the chaos. The group exchanges a look, silent questions passing between them. The Saladin's gaze narrows, and as Zathian speaks, his eyes wander over the man's gear, taking in the scuffed leather and well-worn weaponry. Something catches his eye, a marking etched into the metal of Zathian's rifle. It's small, faintly weathered, and just out of clear focus. Saladin squints slightly, trying to make sense of it. but the symbol remains unclear. Organization, Maker's Mark, he files it away for later. Meanwhile, Talek watches Zathian closely, the gears of his mind turning. He remembers the napkin still laying on the table, the strange rune drawn hastily upon it. Slowly, deliberately, he reaches for it and slides it across the table, his movements trying, and failing, to look casual. Zathian's eyes flick down to the napkin. For the first time since sitting down, his expression shifts, just slightly. His brow lifts, and there's a flicker of recognition, as his gaze lingers on the symbol in recognition before it disappears into Talek's pocket. The conversation shifts as drinks continue to flow, the tension slowly softening with each round. Zathian, though guarded, seems more relaxed by the time the group finishes their last drinks for the night. Saladin, always the diplomat, smirks as he pushes his chair back. "All right, Zathian," he says, stretching his arms with a yawn. "Meet us back here in the morning that we've got a few more questions for you. And you're welcome to tag along when we head to the clerics. Might learn something useful." Zathian tilts his head, considering the offer for a moment before nodding. "Fine, and I'll be here." As the group rises to leave, the hum of the tavern fills the air again, swallowing their voices. Talek lingers a moment longer, his gaze drifting back to the napkin before sliding it into his pack once more. The symbol, the raid, Zathian, none of this is coincidence. For now, though, they leave the pieces where they lie. Tomorrow, the answers will come. The following morning, the group gathers again, sharing a hearty breakfast before setting off toward the halls of justice. The massive metallic skyscraper looms along the northern wall of the city, its reflective exterior catching shards of morning light. Rows upon rows of windows gleam like polished scales, housing countless government offices within. Above it all sits the Lord Governor's office, watching over the city like an unblinking sentinel. At the building's base, however, the architecture shifts. Cold steel gives way to wide white stone. Where towering columns frame the entrance to the halls of justice, a dual-purpose structure serving both as the city's judicial center and as a temple dedicated to Celiar, god of truth and justice. The group steps through the grand doors into a cavernous hall. Sunlight spills through high, stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the polished stone floor. In the center stands a massive circular reception desk, marble-topped and perfectly symmetrical. Bureaucrats bustle between offices, their shoes clicking against stone in an oddly harmonious rhythm. Theodore approaches the desk first, clearing his throat. "We're here to see Lady Seraphina." "Tell her," he pauses, lowering his voice slightly, "we recognize the runes." The attendant at the desk, a thin man with sharp spectacles, blinks once, then nods briskly. "One moment, please." Without another word, he slips off down a hallway, leaving the group to wait under the judgmental gaze of carved statues. Lining the hall, depictions of Celiar and his saints, all stern and resolute. A few minutes later, footsteps echo from the far end of the chamber that a woman emerges, striding toward them with purpose. She's dark-haired, her expression carved from stone, serious, unwavering. Her clothes are practical, all in varying shades of white, trousers tucked into sturdy boots, a crisp blouse, and a flowing trench coat that flares out like robes with each step. She stops a few feet away, arms crossing, as her piercing gaze sweeps across the group. "Which of you claims to recognize the symbols?" she asks, her tone sharp and efficient, as though she has no patience for pleasantries. Saladin lifts a hand casually. "We'd be happy to share what we know," he replies smoothly, "but perhaps we could find somewhere a bit more private." Lady Seraphina narrows her eyes, measuring them, but then gives a curt nod. "Follow me." She leads the group through a maze of corridors, her boots ringing against the stone with precise, clipped steps. At last, she pushes open a door labeled Annex Meeting Hall 3, a small, unadorned room with a simple table and chairs. "Speak," she says, gesturing for them to sit. Saladin and Talek trade glances before Talek leans forward, his voice calm but deliberate. "We've seen the runes you're investigating. They bear similarities to symbols used by dark cults, Zorro's Mordril, but they're off. A splinter group, perhaps not a copycat, someone twisting the old meanings into something new." Lady Seraphina listens, her sharp eyes never leaving them. Do you have proof? Not yet, Talek admits, his hands folding on the table. But the symbols are significant. Dead roads. Failed paths that go beyond failure toward something else. Don't we think someone's co-opting these runes? But to what end, that's the question. She tilts her head, her expression unreadable as she weighs their words. Silence lingers in the room, heavy and expectant, before she exhales through her nose, a sound almost like a reluctant concession. You might be right, or you might be wasting my time. We're good at solving mysteries, Theodore pipes up with a small grin. Lady Seraphina ignores the quip and straightens, her tone turning firm. Fine. My clerics are at a standstill that if you think you can help, I won't refuse the assistance. But understand this. You will not be paid unless you produce results. I won't hand out coin for wasted effort. Fair enough, Saladin says with a shrug. We're in it for more than coin anyway. Satisfied, Lady Seraphina nods, and begins pacing slowly. Here's what we know so far. The victims share no discernible connections. Different ages, genders, wealth, professions, normal citizens, leading unremarkable lives. No apparent enemies that end ties to political factions, churches, or criminal organizations. She stops and turns to face them. Whoever is behind, this isn't targeting a type. Either there's no pattern, or we're too blind to see it yet. From the inside pocket of her coat, she produces a slim dossier and places it on the table. Here, details on the victims, the locations, and the timing of each murder. Take it. And this as well. She hands Saladin a sealed letter bearing her sigil, a gleaming set of scales balanced atop a sword. These credentials will grant you access to crime scenes and cooperation from city guards. Saladin accepts both with a respectful nod. We'll do our part. Lady Seraphina's gaze sweeps over the group one final time, as if memorizing their faces. Be careful, she warns. There's more at play here than meets the eye that I suspect you'll learn that soon enough. With that, she strides out of the room, leaving the group alone with the weight of the task ahead. Talek pulls the dossier toward him, already thumbing through the pages, while Saladin turns the sealed letter over in his hands. Dead roads and twisted runes, Theodore murmurs, breaking the silence. I don't know about you lot, but I have a bad feeling about this. Saladin grins, albeit grimly. That's how you know it's worth doing. As the group walks through the city streets, Theodore flips through the dossier, searching for the address of the most recent crime scene. His eyes pause on a page displaying images of the runes. For a moment, the strange symbols seem to shift under his gaze, sending a cold shiver up his spine. He stares, an odd feeling gnawing at him, as though the symbols are watching back. Shaking it off, he exhales sharply, refocuses, and finds the address. The group arrives at a modest apartment building in a decent part of town. It's nothing grand, but not ramshackle either. An area of honest, hard work, and simple living. Presenting their credentials to the city guards, they're waved up to the second floor. Inside, the apartment feels smaller than expected, that it's the home of someone who doesn't linger much, a worker's place. Near the door, the group takes stock of a few telling signs. A scuffed hard hat, heavy worker's boots resting on a mat smeared with ash, and a thick, burn-marked leather apron hanging on a hook. The sharp scent of fire and metal clings to the air, the unmistakable mark of a foundry worker. It's tidy enough to live in, not tidy enough for guests, Theodore mutters as they move through the cramped space. The living room is cluttered with work receipts, stray tools, and a newspaper folded haphazardly over the arm of a chair. The small kitchen holds the remnants of a solitary dinner, half-eaten bread, an empty tankard. Then they step into the bedroom. The scene hits them like a blow. The smell of scorched stone lingers, faint but cloying, like something burned too hot to leave smoke. A perfect, burned circle dominates the floor, its edges blackened and clean. It cuts straight through everything, rugs, furniture, legs, carpet, leaving nothing but smooth stone underneath, scorch pale with heat. The strange runes crawl around the circumference, their forms burned as deep as the circle itself. Talek crouches down first, studying the markings, while the others spread out. Theodore steps closer to the edge of the circle, his brows furrowed in thought. Without realizing it, his lips begin to move, Quietly, almost instinctively, he sounds out the shapes, his voice a low whisper. Own Falric. As the guttural sounds slip past his lips, a violent image slams into his mind. A throne of bone rises at the center of a crossroads, the roads paved with skulls and shattered bones that stretch endlessly in every direction. Above it, a darkened sky churns, its clouds alive, writhing like serpents of shadow. Distant voices mumble and murmur, too many to count, layering over each other in a feverish chant. The words remain unclear, like whispers behind a closed door, but they claw at Theodore's mind all the same. With a sharp gasp, Theodore stumbles back, clutching his head. His breathing is shallow, his face pale as he blinks hard to clear the vision. The others turn to him, concerned. Theo? Saladin asks, his voice edged with tension. Theodore steadies himself, running a hand down his face. I saw something at a throne. Made of bone at a crossroads, roads made of skulls. He swallows hard, and voices, so many voices. I couldn't understand them. The group exchanges uneasy glances. Talek breaks the silence, muttering, That's not something you just see. Yeah, Theodore agrees weakly. I'm not thrilled about it either. After taking a final look around, they leave the apartment and head downstairs. The group knocks on the door to the unit below, where a young halfling man opens up, bleary-eyed and suspicious. With a bit of smooth talking, they convince him that they're inspectors checking for structural damage. The halfling grudgingly lets them in. The ceiling, however, is untouched, normal, solid stone. No burns, no cracks, that it's as though whatever happened above never reached through. Saladin shrugs at the others, and they quietly excuse themselves, making their way toward the morgue. Once again flashing their credentials, the group enters the cold, sterile depths of the morgue. The room smells of alcohol and preserved bodies that a single corpse rests on a stone slab, covered only by a thin cloth. Theodore hesitates as the attendant pulls back the cloth, revealing the body face down. Etched into the pale, stiff flesh of the back are the same runes they've seen before. Below them, a series of lines are scratched into the skin in careful common. Of the land in the land foreign, the place of dying paths, in the place of dead paths, in the place of dead roads. The repetition unsettles them. Talek mutters under his breath, someone's working something out. Testing phrases, testing meanings like a ritual. Theodore reads aloud, his voice hollow. Dead roads. That's what I saw, pads of bone and skulls. The notes in the morgue confirm something chilling. When the body was discovered, it was kneeling, arms slack, head bowed, almost as if in prayer. Let's move it, Saladin suggests. See what we're dealing with. He steps forward, placing his hands under the body to lift it back into its original kneeling position. As he does, his face shifts into a grimace. It's dry, he mutters, not just drained of blood dried out. Completely, like it's been baked, but he gestures to the corpse's unburned skin. No burns, just gone. A chill runs through the group as they step back, staring at the body in its eerily reverent pose. I don't like this, Talek says quietly. Theodore nods. You're not alone. With little more to glean from the scene, the group departs, the silence hanging heavy between them. They make their way back to the keg, the familiar warmth of the tavern a stark contrast to the cold weight of what they've just seen. Once upstairs in Saladin's room, the group gathers around the small table. Theodore spreads the dossier, the vision still clawing at the edge of his mind. All right, Saladin says, leaning back against the wall. We've got burned circles, dried out bodies, and dead roads. What do we know, and where do we go from here? The group exchanges glances, the pieces of the puzzle scattered before them like shards of glass. It's clear now, this is no random act of violence. Whatever is happening, it's only the beginning.